I want a divorce. Already moved out. Emptied our account too. Don't try to contact me. My hands didn't shake as I read the text. My voice didn't waver as I explained the solar system model to Emma. The only sign that my husband of 14 years had just nuked our marriage via text message was a slight tightening around my eyes. I waited until Emma went to bed, her planets perfectly aligned and rotating, before typing my response. Understood. Good luck. My name is Rebecca, and at 42, I'd just received the most callous goodbye in history. But while Nathan was probably gloating over his dramatic exit, imagining me in tears over his betrayal, I was calmly logging into my laptop and opening a folder labeled Plan B. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I waited until Emma went to bed, her planets perfectly aligned and rotating, before typing my response. Understood. Good luck. My name is Rebecca, and at 42, I just received the most callous goodbye in history. But while Nathan was probably gloating over his dramatic exit, imagining me in tears over his betrayal, I was calmly logging into my laptop and opening a folder labeled Plan B. When I married Nathan at 28, I believed in fairy tales. He was charming, ambitious, and promised me the world. 14 years and 2 children later, that world had shrunk to a suburban house where I walked on eggshells, carefully managing his moods while he controlled our finances with an iron grip. His quick temper had gradually transformed into psychological control. "You're overthinking things again," he'd say whenever I questioned a strange charge on our credit card. "This is why we agreed I should handle the money." Except I never agreed to that. It simply happened, one small surrender at a time. The signs of his betrayal had been there for months. The late nights at work that never matched his paycheck. The sudden password changes on his phone. The mysterious weekend conferences with no paperwork or follow-up emails. The way he'd started criticizing my appearance, my cooking, my parenting, anything, to chip away at my confidence. The scent of unfamiliar perfume that he blamed on the department store elevator. 3 months ago, I'd found a receipt for diamond earrings tucked in his pants pocket while doing laundry. Jewelry I'd never received, from a boutique I'd never heard of. That same evening, after he'd left for another late meeting, I'd called my sister Jenna, a divorce attorney, and begun preparing for the inevitable. "He did what?" Jenna gasped when I called her after Emma fell asleep tonight. "By text message? And emptied your accounts? Please tell me you were prepared." "More than he knows," I replied, opening the documentation I'd been gathering for months. Bank statements showing unexplained withdrawals totaling over $15,000 in the past year. Credit card bills with charges for hotels on nights he claimed to be working late. A paper trail of cash advances I'd never known about. Screenshots of conversations with our children where he'd promised things he never delivered. A pattern of unreliability I'd carefully documented. My phone buzzed again with another text. "Don't make this difficult. You're not getting anything. Already talked to a lawyer." Then another. "I'll send for the kids on weekends when I'm settled." The kids. As if our children were possessions to be divided like furniture. As if Emma, 11, and Lucas, 9, wouldn't be devastated by their fathers. Casual abandonment. That was when I felt the first flicker of genuine anger, quickly channeled into determination. "When did you make your last move?" Jenna asked, switching from concerned sister to legal professional. 2 months ago, I replied, pulling up my private banking app. After he suggested, I closed my personal account because we don't need separate finances in a marriage. I agreed, then opened a new account at a different bank. I've been moving half my teacher's salary there with each paycheck. I'd been a high school English teacher for 12 years, a career Nathan regularly diminished as playing with books all day. What he failed to understand was how much I'd learned about human nature, about recognizing patterns, about reading between the lines of what people say versus what they do. Smart move, Jenna said. What about the joint account? The one he emptied tonight contained our household expenses plus a buffer, about $5,200. Enough to keep him from getting suspicious, but less than a quarter of our actual savings. The rest was safely tucked away, along with copies of every suspicious transaction he'd made in the past year. My preparations weren't just financial, I'd been rebuilding myself too. The online accounting classes he'd mocked as pointless hobbies. The therapy sessions disguised as book club meetings. The editing side business I'd grown quietly while he dismissed my little projects. Small seeds of independence, planted and nurtured in secret. My phone vibrated with another message. Don't bother calling my parents. I've already told them everything. They understand why I had to leave. I could imagine what everything entailed. Carefully. Crafted lies that painted me as cold, controlling, unloving. Nathan was a master at rewriting history, at making himself the hero of every story, the victim of any conflict. But this time, I had receipts, literal and figurative. You need to take screenshots of all these messages, Jenna advised. His admission that he emptied the account is gold for us. Already doing it, I said, methodically saving each text to my evidence folder. My phone rang, not Nathan, but his mother. I took a deep breath and answered. Rebecca? Is it true? Nathan says you've been emotionally distant for years, that you pushed him away. Her voice trailed off, uncertain. Nathan sent me a text message tonight, Linda. He's divorcing me and emptied our bank account. Did he mention that part? My voice remained steady, factual. Silence. Then a soft, oh my God. I have copies of everything, Linda. The hotel charges, the jewelry receipts, the unexplained withdrawals. I'd be happy to share them with you. The line went quiet for so long I thought she'd hung up. Finally, she spoke again, her voice different. The children, are they okay? They're asleep. They don't know yet. I glanced at the ceiling, above which my children slept peacefully, unaware that their world was about to change. He told us you two had been discussing separation for months, she said, her voice now tinged with anger. That this was mutual. The first I heard of it was the text message tonight, I replied. Would you like to see it? Yes, she said firmly. Send everything. Robert and I need to know what's really happening. After promising to forward the evidence to his parents, I hung up and returned to my laptop. Beyond the financial records, I had a detailed parenting plan, a draft custody arrangement prepared by Jenna, research on the best ways to support children through divorce. While Nathan had been planning his escape, I'd been planning for our survival. My phone lit up with another message from him. You can keep the house for now. I won't be that cruel. Just don't fight me on anything else. The house that was solely in my name. The house I'd inherited from my grandparents and had refused to refinance when Nathan wanted to access the equity last year. Another lucky instinct that had paid off. I didn't respond to his text. Instead, I sent a message to my school principal. Need to take tomorrow off. Family emergency. Then I emailed my therapist. It's happened. Can we move my appointment to morning? I closed my laptop and walked through the quiet house, checking on my sleeping children. Emma had kicked off her covers as usual, her science project planets still gently spinning on her desk. Lucas clutched his favorite stuffed dinosaur, a gift from his father that would now carry complicated emotions. Tomorrow would bring tears and difficult conversations. I would hold my children while they processed their father's abandonment. I would begin the formal process of dissolving a marriage that had been decaying for years. But tonight, I sat in the armchair by my bedroom window, looking out at the neighborhood Nathan had just fled, and felt something unexpected beneath the shock and anger. Relief. I woke before my alarm, the momentary peace of half-sleep shattered, as reality rushed back. My bed felt too large, though Nathan hadn't slept beside me for weeks, always claiming to fall asleep watching TV downstairs. Now I knew those nights he'd likely been messaging his escape plans from the couch, plotting his exit while under the same roof. My phone showed 17 new texts from him, each more desperate than the last. "Why aren't you responding? You're being childish. The silent treatment is exactly why I left. My lawyer says I'm entitled to half the house. Don't tell the kids anything until I figure out how to explain. The last one, sent at 3:42 a.m., caught my attention. My card was declined. What did you do? What did you?" I smiled for the first time since the text that ended my marriage. While Nathan had been emptying our joint account yesterday, I'd been making a call to our credit card company. "I need to report unauthorized use and remove my husband as an authorized user," I'd told them calmly, providing the documentation I'd prepared. The representative had been impressively efficient, canceling his cards immediately. The doorbell rang at 7:30 a.m., just as I was pouring cereal for Emma and Lucas. They were still in their pajamas, sleepy-eyed and unaware that their world had changed overnight. Through the peephole, I saw Linda and Robert, Nathan's parents, standing on my porch. Their faces were drawn with concern and something else. Embarrassment. "Mom, it's Grandma and Grandpa," Lucas exclaimed, rushing to open the door before I could prepare them. Linda immediately knelt to hug my children, her eyes meeting mine over their shoulders. "We thought you might need some support this morning," she said quietly, "and we wanted to see our grandchildren." Robert stood awkwardly behind her, his jaw tight with what I recognized as anger, not at me, but at his son. Under his arm was a manila envelope. "Kids, why don't you show Grandpa your science projects while I talk to Grandma in the kitchen?" I suggested, receiving grateful nods from both grandparents. In the kitchen, Linda placed her hands flat on the counter, steadying herself. "I couldn't sleep after your call. We went through Nathan's childhood bedroom this morning, looking for, I don't know what. Answers, maybe. Signs we'd missed." She paused, gathering herself. "We found these." She pulled several bank statements from her purse. They showed large transfers to an account I didn't recognize, dating back 8 months. "These were mailed to our house. He must have changed the address on this account without telling you. He's been planning this for a while," I said, unsurprised, but still feeling the sting of calculated betrayal. "Rebecca, Robert, and I want you to know," her voice broke slightly, "we don't support what he's doing. Not the way he's doing it. We saw the text you forwarded last night. That's not how we raised him." From the living room came the sound of Lucas's laughter as Robert apparently said something amusing about his volcano project. The normalcy of it twisted something in my chest. How would I tell them? What words could possibly soften the blow? "The children don't know yet," I said. "I wanted to speak with my therapist first about the best approach." Linda nodded, then hesitated before asking, "Is there someone else?" "I think so," I admitted. "There have been signs. Late nights, unexplained expenses, new cologne. The classic clichés. Do you know who?" I shook my head. "It doesn't really matter now, does it? The marriage is over either way." My phone buzzed again. "Nathan, tell my parents to stop interfering. This is between us." I showed the text to Linda, whose face hardened. "He knows we're here? How? The smart doorbell." Of course. Nathan had installed it last year, insisting on the premium model that sent alerts to both our phones. I'd forgotten he could see visitors remotely. Another privacy issue to address. "I'll need to change a lot of passwords and accounts," I muttered, making a mental note to add it to my growing to-do list. My phone rang. Jenna, right on schedule. "I'm on my way," she said without preamble. "I've filed the emergency petition for temporary orders. The judge can see us at 2 p.m. Can you make it?" "Yes," I replied, glancing at Linda, who was pretending not to listen while arranging coffee mugs. "Nathan's parents are here. They found some additional financial records we should discuss." "Perfect timing. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Has he tried to contact you again?" Multiple times I'm documenting everything. After hanging up, I turned to Linda. My sister is coming over. She's a family law attorney. I hope that's okay. Of course, Linda said, then added hesitantly. Robert brought some papers from our safe. Nathan added his name to some of our accounts recently. We're worried about what he might do. Her face showed the painful conflict of a mother torn between protecting her son and doing what's right. Just then, Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway, her perceptive eyes taking in the tension. At 11, she missed very little. Mom, where's Dad? His car isn't in the garage and his closet is empty. The moment I'd been dreading arrived sooner than expected. I glanced at Linda, who nodded slightly in support. Let's sit down, sweetheart. We need to talk. Can you ask Lucas and Grandpa to join us? Once we were all seated in the living room, the children on the couch between their grandparents, me kneeling in front of them, I took a deep breath. Dad has decided to move out, I began carefully, watching their faces. He sent me a message last night telling me that he wants a divorce. Lucas's face scrunched in confusion. Like Zach's parents? They live in different houses now. Yes. Something like that, I confirmed, my heart breaking at how quickly he was processing this. Emma's reaction was sharper. He didn't even say goodbye? He just left? I struggled to find words that wouldn't demonize their father while still being truthful. He made this decision on his own and didn't handle it well. Is he coming back? Lucas asked, his voice small. Before I could answer, the doorbell rang again. Through the window, I could see Jenna's car in the driveway. Robert went to let her in while I continued the painful conversation. Dad won't be living with us anymore, but he'll still be your dad. The details about when you'll see him are something we need to work out. Emma, always quick to understand, narrowed her eyes. Did he do something bad? Is that why he left without saying anything? From the entryway, Jenna appeared, her attorney demeanor firmly in place despite being in casual clothes. She smiled gently at the children, then raised an eyebrow at me, silently asking if she should give us more time. This is complicated, Emma, I said, choosing my words with care. The important thing for both of you to know is that this isn't your fault, and both your dad and I love you very much. Lucas seemed satisfied with this, but Emma clearly wasn't. She had her father's sharp intelligence and my attention to detail, a formidable combination. If he loves us, why would he leave without saying goodbye? Robert cleared his throat. Sometimes adults make mistakes, Emma. Big ones. The pain in his voice was evident. Your dad made a very poor choice in how he handled this. My phone buzzed again and Emma's eyes darted to it. Is that him? Can I talk to him? I checked the screen. Another text from Nathan. I'll pick up the kids this weekend. Have them ready by 10 a.m. Saturday. The audacity was breathtaking. After abandoning his family via text message and emptying our account, he expected to simply collect the children on his schedule, like picking up dry cleaning. Not right now, sweetheart, I said, putting my phone away. We all need some time to figure things out first. Jenna stepped forward. Hey, kiddos, remember me? Your cool aunt who brings the best birthday presents? Her attempt at lightness earned small smiles. How about you show me that awesome treehouse in the backyard while your mom talks to Grandma and Grandpa for a minute? Once the children were out back with Jenna, I turned to Nathan's parents, finally letting my composed facade crack slightly. I don't know how to protect them from this. He's their father, but he's acting like they're possessions to be claimed on weekends. Linda reached for my hand. We'll help. Whatever you and the children need. Robert nodded in agreement, then handed me the manila envelope he'd been holding. These are copies of everything we found. Nathan came to us last month asking for a loan. We gave him $10,000 because he said it was for Emma's future education fund. We'd like to know where that money really went. I opened the envelope to find a check carbon, bank statements, and a handwritten letter from Nathan to his parents explaining his investment plan for Emma's education. The date matched a large deposit to his private account that Linda had discovered. Money that had likely already been transferred to whatever new account he'd established for his fresh start. "I'll add this to our documentation," I said. "My appointment with the judge is at 2 p.m. today. I'm filing for emergency temporary orders to freeze remaining assets and establish temporary custody." Linda squeezed my hand. "We'll stay with the children while you go. And Rebecca, we're going to make this right. Somehow." Through the window, I could see Lucas climbing the treehouse ladder while Emma and Jenna sat on the platform above, deep in conversation. My daughter's serious expression told me she was asking the hard questions I'd tried to soften. Jenna would be direct but kind. It was why I'd wanted her here. My phone buzzed yet again. Nathan had sent a photo, his new apartment key with a caption, "Freedom at last." I showed it to his parents, who exchanged pained glances. "He's always been impulsive," Robert said quietly. "But this is something else." "No," I corrected, a clarity washing over me. "This isn't impulsive. This is calculated. He's been planning this for months." As if to confirm my words, another text arrived. "By the way, I've been documenting your emotional neglect for the past year. My lawyer says it will help with custody. Nothing personal." I felt a cold wave of anger, quickly channeled into resolve. Nathan had underestimated me throughout our marriage. He was still underestimating me now, assuming I'd be too shocked, too emotional, too unprepared to fight back. He had no idea what was coming. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." The courthouse loomed ahead, an imposing limestone structure that had witnessed countless family dissolutions. I smoothed my navy pantsuit, purchased 3 months ago for exactly this scenario, and checked my appearance in the car's visor mirror. Professional, composed, prepared. "Ready?" Jenna asked, gathering her leather portfolio and briefcase. "As I'll ever be," I replied, taking a deep breath. We were 20 minutes early for our hearing, time Jenna had intentionally built in for last-minute preparation. As we climbed the courthouse steps, my phone buzzed. "Your lawyer's sister won't save you. My attorney says you have no case for emergency orders. See you in regular court in 6 to 8 weeks. I'll be keeping my freedom and my money until then." I wordlessly showed the text to Jenna, who raised an eyebrow. "He really thinks he's untouchable," she muttered, adding the screenshot to her tablet. "Let's see how that plays in about—" She checked her watch. 18 minutes. The courtroom for emergency hearings was smaller than I'd imagined, with worn wooden benches and fluorescent lighting that hummed faintly overhead. We took seats near the front, and Jenna arranged her materials methodically. "Remember," she whispered, "Judge Harmon is direct and doesn't tolerate unnecessary emotion, but she takes financial misconduct very seriously. Answer only what's asked, keep responses factual, and let the evidence speak for itself." I nodded, scanning the room nervously. "What if Nathan shows up?" "He won't," Jenna said confidently. "He thinks he's called our bluff. Men like Nathan believe the rules don't apply to them until they're forced to learn otherwise." She was right. When our case was called, we approached the bench alone. No Nathan, no opposing counsel. His overconfidence was working in our favor. Judge Harmon, a stern-faced woman in her 60s, peered at us over reading glasses. "Petition for emergency temporary orders in Harrison versus Harrison. I see the respondent isn't present?" "No, Your Honor," Jenna confirmed. "Despite proper notice of today's hearing, my brother-in-law has chosen not to appear. We have evidence he's been notified." She presented the delivery confirmation and the text messages he'd sent acknowledging the hearing. The judge reviewed our petition, occasionally looking up to study my face. I maintained eye contact, willing her to see the truth behind the paperwork. "Mrs. Harrison, your petition alleges your husband emptied your joint bank account of $5,241.38, has been transferring funds to hidden accounts for approximately 8 months. has vacated the marital home without notice and informed you of his intention to divorce solely via text message. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. And you're seeking an emergency freeze on remaining marital assets, temporary exclusive use of the marital home, and temporary full custody of your minor children. Yes, Your Honor, I repeated, my voice steady. The text messages submitted with your petition are unusual, the judge noted, flipping through the printouts. In your husband's own words, he admits to emptying the account and planning this exit for some time. Yes, Your Honor, he seems quite proud of it. The words slipped out before I could censor myself. To my surprise, Judge Harmon's mouth twitched slightly. Indeed. She reviewed more documents, then looked up. I see you've also submitted statements from your husband's parents? Jenna nodded. They're present in the courtroom if the court wishes to hear from them directly. I turned, surprised to see Linda and Robert seated in the back row. They'd told me they would stay with the children. Linda offered a small smile and nod of encouragement. Judge Harmon studied the affidavits. They attest that Mr. Harrison solicited $10,000 from them under false pretenses, claiming it was for your daughter's education fund? Yes, Your Honor. That money was transferred to an account we recently discovered, then moved again. We believe it's part of a larger pattern of financial misconduct. The judge reviewed the bank statements, frowning at the pattern of withdrawals and transfers. After what felt like an eternity, she looked up. Based on the evidence presented, I find sufficient cause to grant the emergency orders as requested. All marital assets are frozen pending further proceedings. Mrs. Harrison is granted temporary exclusive possession of the marital residence. Temporary full custody of the minor children is granted to Mrs. Harrison, with supervised visitation for Mr. Harrison to be arranged through family court services. Relief coursed through me, but the judge wasn't finished. Additionally, given the nature of Mr. Harrison's actions, I'm ordering him to return the $5,141.38 removed from the joint account within 48 hours. Failure to comply will result in contempt proceedings. She fixed me with a stern look. Mrs. Harrison, despite your husband's approach to this dissolution, I expect you to facilitate appropriate contact between him and your children. Of course, Your Honor, my only concern is their emotional well-being. The judge nodded, then addressed Jenna. Counsel, please prepare the order for my signature. I'm expediting this matter given the circumstances. We'll schedule a follow-up hearing in 2 weeks to review compliance and determine next steps. With a bang of her gavel, it was done. The first battle won. In the hallway outside, Linda and Robert embraced me. We're so sorry, Linda whispered. We had no idea he was capable of this. The judge was impressed by your statements, I told them. Thank you for being willing to stand up to your own son. Robert looked pained. He's not the boy we raised. I don't know who this man is. My phone buzzed, another text from Nathan. I braced myself and looked down. What the hell did you do? My accounts are frozen. You had no right. Before I could respond, it buzzed again. My lawyer says this is illegal harassment. We're filing a counter-motion immediately. And again. You turned my parents against me? Low blow, Rebecca. Really showing your true colors now. I showed the messages to Jenna, who shook her head in disbelief. He still doesn't get it, does he? She muttered. This isn't about you versus him. This is about legal consequences for financial misconduct. Linda asked hesitantly, should we try talking to him? Maybe we could make him understand what he's doing to his family. I think it's better if we maintain clear boundaries right now, I advised gently. He's looking for someone to blame, and he's not in a place to hear reason. As we walked to the parking lot, Jenna outlined next steps: filing for formal dissolution, detailed financial discovery, custody evaluation. It felt overwhelming, but also like forward movement. For the first time in years, I was taking control instead of walking on eggshells. Where do you think he's staying? Robert asked as we reached our cars. His latest text had a photo of an apartment key, I said. I assume he's rented a place, probably using the money he's been siphoning away. He asked us for his old bedroom furniture this morning, Linda admitted, looking embarrassed. We thought he was donating it. Now I realize he didn't have enough money for furniture, I finished, the reality sinking in. He probably spent most of what he took on the apartment deposit and first month's rent. Jenna checked her watch. The banks will be receiving the asset freeze orders within the hour. If he's got any marital funds left, he won't be able to access them soon. As if on cue, my phone rang. Not a text this time, but an actual call from Pfar. Nathan. I stared at the screen, uncertain. You should answer, Jenna advised. Put it on speaker. Witnesses are good. I accepted the call. Hello, Nathan. What have you done? His voice was tight with fury. I'm at Target buying basic necessities and my card was declined. Declined, Rebecca, like I'm some kind of deadbeat. Irony was so thick I almost laughed. The judge issued emergency orders freezing marital assets. You received notice of the hearing. That was a bluff. No judge would rule without hearing my side. Actually, Jenna interjected, judges routinely issue emergency orders when there's clear evidence of financial misconduct, like emptying joint accounts and bragging about it via text message. Who is that? Is that your sister? Am I on speaker? His voice rose in indignation. Yes, Nathan, I have Jenna with me, and your parents are here too. A moment of stunned silence followed. Mom? Dad? You're helping her do this to me? Linda stepped closer to the phone. Nathan, you emptied your family's bank account and left without saying goodbye to your children. What did you expect would happen? I expected my family to support me, he shouted. Not conspire against me. Robert's voice was tight with controlled anger. We are supporting family, son. Rebecca and our grandchildren are family too. You're the one who walked away from that responsibility. Nathan's voice turned cold. I see how it is. You've all turned against me. Fine. My lawyer will handle this from now on. Don't contact me again. The call ended abruptly. We stood in uncomfortable silence until Linda spoke. He sounds like a teenager, having a tantrum, she said sadly. Not a 45-year-old father of two? That's exactly what it is, I agreed. He's not getting his way, and he doesn't know how to handle it. As we prepared to leave, Jenna pulled me aside. You know what comes next, right? This initial victory will make him more desperate. He'll try to find ways around the orders, may attempt to contact the children directly, possibly say things to turn them against you. I nodded, the weight of what lay ahead settling on my shoulders. I know. We've prepared Emma and Lucas as best we can, and their school counselor is aware of the situation. Good. Document everything. Every call, every text, every missed visit, or broken promise to the kids. It all builds our case. She squeezed my arm. You're doing great, Beck. You're stronger than even I realized. On the drive home, I considered what had transpired in just 24 hours. My marriage had officially imploded. My children's world had been shaken. My husband had revealed himself to be someone I barely recognized. Yet somehow, I felt more centered than I had in years. Nathan had expected me to crumble, to beg, to negotiate, to concede. Instead, I had prepared, documented, and acted decisively. The emergency orders were just the beginning, but they sent a clear message. I would not be bullied or manipulated. Not anymore. At home, Emma and Lucas were playing a board game with their babysitter, a neighbor I trusted. Their faces lit up when I walked in, and for a moment I saw our future, not the broken family Nathan had created, but a new configuration, built on honesty and respect. Did you see Dad? Emma asked immediately. No, sweetheart. He didn't come to the courthouse. I sat beside them, helping Lucas straighten his game pieces. but we have some clear rules now about how things will work, while Dad and I figure everything out. Will we see him soon? Lucas asked, his innocence piercing my heart. Yes, but there will be some special arrangements to make sure everyone feels safe and comfortable. I chose my words carefully. A lot has changed very quickly, and we all need time to adjust. As I helped prepare dinner, my phone buzzed with one final text from Nathan. This isn't over, not by a long shot. I looked at my children, at the home we'd built, at the life that would continue despite his attempt to destroy our financial security. No, I thought, it isn't over. But it's not going to end the way you planned either. The battle had just begun, but for the first time in too long, I was fighting back. The next 2 weeks unfolded in a bizarre dance of legal maneuvers and emotional warfare. Nathan's promised countermotion was filed the very next day, a rambling document filled with accusations of emotional neglect, manipulation, and claims that I had tricked the judge with false evidence. His attorney, Martin Reeves, had a reputation for aggressive tactics and questionable ethics. The filing showed both their fingerprints, Nathan's emotional accusations and Reeves's strategic attempts to shift focus from the financial misconduct. This is actually good for us, Jenna explained as we reviewed the filing over coffee. They're desperate and overreaching. Look at these claims, that you systematically alienated Nathan from family decisions, that you controlled the household with rigid rules. He's describing his own behavior and projecting it onto you. I nodded, recognizing the pattern from our marriage. Anytime I confronted Nathan about his actions, he would twist the situation until somehow I was apologizing to him. What about this part? I pointed to a particularly concerning section. Where? He claims I'm mentally unstable and manipulating the children against him? Jenna's expression hardened. Classic abuser tactics. When caught, discredit the victim. We'll need statements from the children's teachers, your colleagues, friends, anyone who can attest to your stability in parenting. I'd already reached out to my support network, a step I'd planned months ago. My principal had written a glowing letter about my professionalism and composure during difficult times. Emma and Lucas's teachers had provided statements about my consistent involvement in their education. Even our family doctor had prepared a letter confirming my sound judgment regarding the children's health care. He's also claiming the money he took was his share of our joint assets, I noted, the absurdity almost laughable. Yes, because apparently in Nathan's world, his share means all of it, Jenna replied dryly. The judge will see through this, especially since we have his texts explicitly admitting to emptying the account. What concerned me most was Nathan's request for unsupervised visitation that weekend. Despite the court's order for supervised visits, he was arguing that the requirement was unnecessary and damaging to his relationship with his children. He hasn't even called them, I said, frustration building. It's been 2 weeks, not one call to check how they're doing, but now he wants a full weekend alone with them? It's about control, not connection, Jenna reminded me. The visits are supervised because of his demonstrated impulsive behavior and financial misconduct, not as a punishment. If he actually cared about seeing the kids, he would have arranged a supervised visit already. The court had appointed Mrs. Delacourt, a retired family therapist, to supervise any visits Nathan requested. He had her contact information, but hadn't reached out once. My phone chimed with an email alert. Nathan had finally made contact with Mrs. Delacourt, requesting a visit with the children that Saturday. My stomach tightened. Despite his neglect, Emma and Lucas still asked about their father daily. They deserved to see him, even if it hurt to see their hopeful faces knowing he might disappoint them again. At least Mrs. Delacourt will be there, I said, trying to focus on the positive. She'll make sure he doesn't interrogate them or make inappropriate comments. Jenna nodded. Document everything before and after. How the kids feel, anything they report back, any changes in behavior. The visit was arranged for Saturday afternoon at a neutral location, a family center with a playground and activity rooms specifically designed for supervised visitations. I prepared Emma and Lucas carefully, addressing their questions honestly, but age-appropriately. "Will Dad be coming home after this?" Lucas asked, his 7-year-old logic seeking simple solutions. "No, sweetie. Dad has his own place now. This visit is just to spend time together." Emma, perceptive as always, watched me closely. "Are you and Dad fighting?" "We have different ideas about how to handle some grown-up things," I explained. "But we both love you very much, and that won't change." She nodded, unconvinced. Then, why did he leave without saying goodbye? It was the question that haunted both children, the one I couldn't answer satisfactorily because there was no good answer. Dad made some choices that weren't very thoughtful. I think he regrets not saying goodbye to you. The morning of the visit, I helped them choose special outfits and pack small backpacks with their latest artwork and school achievements. Despite everything, I wanted them to have a positive experience. They deserved that much. "Remember," I told them as we drove to the center, "Mrs. Delacourt will be there the whole time. If you feel uncomfortable or want to leave early, just tell her." Mrs. Delacourt met us outside, a kind-faced woman with silver hair and perceptive eyes. She knelt to introduce herself to the children, then took me aside. "Mr. Harrison arrived 20 minutes early," she informed me. "He brought quite a few gifts. I've explained our policy about excessive gift-giving during supervised visits, but he was resistant." I suppressed a sigh. Of course Nathan would try to buy their affection. It was his pattern. When he forgot Emma's dance recital, he brought home an extravagant dollhouse. When he missed Lucas's t-ball championship, he appeared the next day with a new bicycle. "Thank you for setting boundaries," I said. "It's important they connect with him personally, not just through presents." Mrs. Delacourt nodded. "I'll make sure the visit focuses on quality interaction. 2 hours is scheduled, and I'll be present the entire time." Saying goodbye to the children was harder than I'd anticipated. Emma hugged me tightly, whispering, "It's okay, Mom. We'll be fine." My 11-year-old daughter trying to reassure me. Lucas waved bravely as they followed Mrs. Delacourt inside, his small shoulders squared with determination. I waited in my car, unable to leave the parking lot. 2 hours stretched endlessly. I tried grading papers, answering emails, anything, to distract from imagining what was happening inside. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "They deserve better than you. Nathan." He must have gotten a new phone, circumventing my call blocking. I forwarded the message to Jenna without responding and added it to my documentation file. Another message followed. "Emma told me you've been crying every night. Way too. Traumatize our kids." A lie. I hadn't cried in front of the children once, making sure to process my emotions privately or with my therapist. This was Nathan's attempt to unsettle me, to regain psychological control. I documented it without responding. The 2 hours finally ended. I watched through the windshield as Mrs. Delacourt emerged with Emma and Lucas. My heart sank. Lucas was clutching an enormous stuffed dinosaur, almost as big as he was, and Emma's face was tight with an emotion I couldn't immediately identify. Not sadness, but something more complex. They climbed into the car quietly, the usual post-visit chatter absent. "How did it go?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. Lucas hugged his dinosaur. "Dad got me Rex. He's the biggest one in the store." Emma said nothing, staring out the window. "That was nice of him," I acknowledged. "Did you have fun playing together?" Dad was on his phone a lot, Lucas said matter-of-factly. "He kept taking pictures of us with the toys and then texting." I glanced at Emma in the rearview mirror. Her expression had hardened into something I recognized, the same look I'd seen in The mirror countless times during my marriage. Disappointment managed with dignity. He asked a lot of questions, she finally said. About you. About who visits our house. If you say bad things about him. Mrs. Delacour told him twice to stop. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. I'm sorry he put you in that position, sweetheart. You don't have to answer questions that make you uncomfortable. I know, she said. That's what Mrs. Delacour told us. She paused, then added, Dad said he's going to get us back soon, that we'll be living with him and his friend Alicia on weekends. Is that true? Alicia. Finally. A name for the other woman. And Nathan was already making promises about custody, arrangements that directly contradicted the court's orders. The judge has made certain decisions about where you'll be living, I explained carefully. Right now, those decisions mean you'll be staying with me. If anything changes, I promise I'll talk to you about it. Emma nodded, seemingly satisfied with this honest but age-appropriate explanation. Lucas had already moved on, making his dinosaur walk along the car seat. At home, I received Mrs. Delacour's report by email. Her professional tone couldn't entirely mask her concerns. Mr. Harrison exhibited difficulty focusing on the children's needs and interests. Repeatedly directed conversation toward gathering information about Ms. Harrison. Attempted to make promises regarding future living arrangements that contradict current court orders. Used excessive gift-giving as a substitute for meaningful interaction. Her recommendation was clear. Continued supervision for all visits, with a reevaluation after 3 successful supervised interactions. I forwarded the report to Jenna, who responded immediately. This supports our position perfectly. His behavior shows exactly why supervision is necessary. That evening, after the children were asleep, I finally allowed myself to process the day. Nathan's manipulation tactics were evolving. Unable to control me directly, he was attempting to use our children as pawns. The expensive gifts, the inappropriate questions, the false promises, all designed to drive a wedge between us. My phone buzzed with a new message from Nathan's latest number. The kids told me everything. I know you're poisoning them against me. My lawyer will use this. I added the message to my documentation without responding. Let him believe his tactics were working. Let him think I was falling apart. His underestimation had always been my greatest advantage. The next morning, I checked our joint credit card account, the one Nathan kept making. 3 days after the supervised visit, I received an email from our mortgage company that made my blood run cold. Someone had attempted to apply for a home equity line of credit against our house, my house, using both our names. The attempt had been flagged because the application required 2 signatures, and mine had clearly been forged. He can't be this stupid, I muttered, immediately forwarding the email to Jenna. I'd placed a freeze on my credit the day after Nathan's text message divorce, another precaution from my preparation checklist. That freeze had triggered the mortgage company's security protocols. Jenna called within minutes. This is criminal activity now, she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. Forgery, attempted fraud. We need to report this. Are you sure? Involving the police feels... I trailed off, the old instinct to protect Nathan surfacing despite everything. Rebecca, Jenna's voice softened. This isn't just about the divorce anymore. He tried to steal equity from your house, your children's home. This crosses a line. She was right. I'd been documenting Nathan's escalating behavior, watching as his initial shock transformed into indignation, then rage, then calculated attempts to punish me. Each step revealed more of who he truly was, or perhaps who he'd been all along, beneath the charming facade I'd married. We filed a police report that afternoon. Detective Morales, a compact woman with keen eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, took detailed notes as I explained the situation. Unfortunately, we see this type of behavior frequently in contentious divorces, she explained. Financial desperation leads to poor decisions. Do you have the original divorce text message and evidence of the account being emptied? I provided everything: the text messages, bank statements, court orders, and now the fraudulent loan application. Detective Morales reviewed the materials methodically. There's a clear pattern here, she observed. Your husband appears to be growing more desperate as his initial plan unravels. She looked up from her notes. Has he made any threats, direct or implied? I thought of his messages after the supervised visit. Not physical threats, but he's been trying to intimidate me through the children and suggesting he'll get them back. From me, despite the court orders. The detective frowned. I'd recommend upgrading your home security. Change the locks if you haven't already, and consider a simple camera system. Document any unexpected appearances or escalation in his messages. My stomach tightened. I hadn't seriously considered that Nathan might become physically threatening. Throughout our marriage, he'd wielded power through emotional manipulation and financial control, not physical intimidation. But people in desperation sometimes revealed hidden capacities for harm. That evening, Robert, Nathan's father, arrived with a locksmith. Linda and I discussed it, he explained as the locksmith worked. We want to make sure you and the children are safe. I don't think Nathan would actually, I began, but Robert shook his head. Neither do I, but I never thought he'd empty your account or forge your signature either. Better safe than sorry. While the locksmith changed the front and back door locks, Robert installed simple camera doorbells he'd purchased. His methodical approach reminded me painfully of Nathan in the early years of our marriage, before resentment had calcified into cruelty. Have you heard from him? I asked, as Robert programmed the new security app on my phone. He calls Linda. Occasionally, usually when he needs something. Robert's expression was carefully neutral, but the pain in his eyes was evident. He's staying with someone named Alicia. Apparently they've been friends for about a year. A year. The timeline clicked with when Nathan's behavior had changed most dramatically. The increased criticism, the late nights, the emotional distance. While I'd noticed the signs of his dissatisfaction, I'd missed the obvious conclusion. Another woman. Linda and I, Robert continued hesitantly, we found something else you should know about. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. We were closing our safe deposit box, moving our important papers somewhere Nathan doesn't have access to, and found this. Inside was a life insurance policy on me, taken out 18 months ago. Nathan was the sole beneficiary of a $500,000 policy I'd never known existed. My name had been forged on this document too. I don't understand, I whispered, staring at the paper. Why would he? Robert looked ill. We don't think he planned to harm you. But combined with everything else, the hidden accounts, the systematic financial deception, it painted a disturbing picture we couldn't ignore. We've already reported it to the insurance company as fraudulent. I sat heavily on the couch, the implications washing over me. Had Nathan merely been creating a financial safety net? Or was there something darker in his contingency planning? I couldn't bring myself to consider the worst possibilities. Thank you for telling me, I managed. And for helping with the security measures. Robert nodded grimly. Linda and I have been doing a lot of soul-searching. Where did we go wrong with him? How did we miss the signs of who he was becoming? We've started therapy ourselves, trying to understand. After he left, I reviewed all the new information with a strange detachment, as if assembling evidence about a stranger rather than the man I'd spent 14 years with. The insurance policy especially disturbed me. It suggested a level of calculation that went beyond emotional betrayal into something more sinister. I called Jenna again, forwarding the insurance documents. Jesus, she breathed when she understood what she was seeing. Rebecca, this changes things. We need to amend our filings to include this new evidence of fraud. And frankly, we should consider a restraining order. He hasn't threatened me directly, I reminded her. He forged your signature. On a life insurance policy, Rebecca. That's concerning enough on its own. I spent that night checking the locks repeatedly, startling at every household creak and settling noise. The children were with Linda and Robert for the evening, a planned dinner I'd initially hesitated about, but now was grateful for. I needed space to process this latest revelation. My phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number, Nathan's newest attempt to bypass my blocks. Stop turning my parents against me. They're installing cameras at the house? What the hell have you been telling? Them? I didn't respond, simply documented the contact. Another buzz. I know you filed a police report. Alicia saw you at the station. This is harassment. Alicia had seen me? That meant she'd been watching, or Nathan had asked her to monitor my movements. The thought sent a chill through me. A final message. You think you're so clever with your evidence and your police reports. But I know things about you no one else does. Remember that. This last text carried an implicit threat. I forwarded it to Detective Morales, who called immediately. This qualifies as indirect intimidation, she confirmed. Combined with the fraudulent insurance policy, there's enough to pursue a temporary restraining order if you want to go that route. Did I want that? A formal legal barrier seemed like an escalation, but then again, Nathan had been the one escalating at every turn. My instinct to avoid provoking him further was a remnant of old patterns, managing his emotions, walking on eggshells, prioritizing peace over protection. Yes, I decided firmly. Let's pursue the restraining order. The next morning, as I prepared to take Emma and Lucas to school, I discovered a flat tire on my car. Then another. All 4 tires had been slashed during the night. The security cameras Robert had installed captured the incident. The footage showed a woman, not Nathan, approaching my car at 2:18 a.m., methodically puncturing each tire, then looking directly at the camera with a smirk before walking away. Alicia. I recognized her from the Christmas party at Nathan's company last year. She'd been recently hired in accounting, and Nathan had introduced us briefly. I recalled thinking she seemed overly attentive to him, laughing too loudly at his jokes. I'd dismissed my concern as paranoia. Detective Morales reviewed the footage and confirmed it was sufficient evidence for charges of property damage. This also strengthens your case for the restraining order, she noted. The fact that he's using a proxy to harass you shows a pattern of deliberate intimidation. The temporary restraining order was granted that afternoon. Nathan was prohibited from contacting me directly, coming within 500 feet of our home, my workplace, or the children's school, or using third parties to harass or intimidate me. The order allowed for continued supervised visitation with the children, but required all communication about them to go through Mrs. Delacourt. I wasn't naive enough to believe a legal document would stop Nathan if he was determined to continue his campaign of intimidation. But it established clear legal consequences for further harassment, and the documentation of escalating behavior strengthened our case for the divorce proceedings. That evening, as the children finished homework at the kitchen table, my phone rang with Linda's number. Rebecca! Her voice was strained. Nathan's been arrested. The police came to Alicia's apartment with the restraining order, and apparently he became confrontational. They found some financial documents in the apartment that matched the forgeries. He's being held on charges of attempted fraud, forgery, and resisting service of the order. I sat down, absorbing this new development. Are you and Robert okay? We're managing. I never imagined our son would be in this position. Robert is arranging a lawyer for the criminal charges, but... She hesitated. We want you to know we still support you and the children. What Nathan has done is indefensible. After we hung up, I gathered Emma and Lucas for a difficult conversation. They needed to know about the restraining order and what it meant for their relationship with their father. Dad has been making some bad choices, I explained carefully. The police are helping make sure everyone stays safe while the grown-ups figure things out. Is Dad in trouble? Lucas asked, his lower lip trembling. Yes, sweetheart. He's facing some consequences for his actions. Emma, solemn and perceptive, asked the harder question. Is Dad going to jail? I don't know, I answered honestly. That depends on a lot of things, including the choices Dad makes now. But no matter what happens, I'll be here with you, and we'll get through this together. As I tucked them in that night, I was struck by their resilience. Despite the upheaval, they continued with homework, activities, friendships, the essential business of childhood. They were adapting to our new reality with a flexibility I envied. Later, alone in the living room, I reviewed the events of the past month. Nathan's text message divorce had set in motion a cascade of revelations, each uglier than the last. The man I'd married had become someone capable of forgery, fraud, and using our children as emotional pawns. The restraining order and his arrest were not outcomes I'd wanted or anticipated, but they were the natural consequences of his choices. My phone buzzed with an email notification. Despite everything, my heart still jumped, anticipating another threat or manipulation from Nathan. Instead, it was from my therapist, confirming our appointment for the next day. The subject line read, "Moving forward, next steps." It seemed like an appropriate theme. For the first time since that text message had shattered my world, I was thinking not just about survival, but about what came next. What kind of life would I build for myself and my children from the wreckage of what Nathan had destroyed? Whatever it was, it would be stronger, more authentic, and entirely our own. Nathan spent 3 nights in county jail before being released on bail. The criminal charges, forgery, attempted fraud, criminal property damage, and violation of a restraining order, were serious enough that the judge had set substantial bail. According to Linda, Robert had refused to post it, forcing Nathan to liquidate his personal investment account. His parents' patience had finally reached its limit. I learned about his release from Mrs. Delacourt, who called to inform me that Nathan had contacted her about resuming supervised visitation. He's legally permitted to see the children despite the restraining order against you, she explained. However, given recent events, I've recommended additional safety measures. We'll be using a more structured facility with security personnel present. Something in her tone suggested she knew more than she was saying. Did Nathan say something concerning? She hesitated. I'm required to report anything that suggests potential harm. Mr. Harrison made some comments about taking back what's his and showing everyone the truth. Nothing explicitly threatening, but enough to warrant additional caution. The supervised visit was scheduled for Saturday afternoon. Emma approached it with visible apprehension, while Lucas maintained his innocent eagerness to see his father. I prepared them as best I could, emphasizing that Mrs. Delacourt and the facility staff would ensure everyone's safety. Will Dad be mad about the police? Lucas asked as we drove to the visitation center. He might have big feelings about what's happened, I acknowledged. But those are grown-up problems. You're not responsible for how Dad feels or acts. Emma stared out the window. I don't want to go, she finally admitted. Last time he just asked questions about you and made promises he can't keep. I pulled into a parking spot and turned to face her. You don't have to go if you truly don't want to. That's your right. But sometimes facing difficult situations helps us process them. She considered this, then nodded slowly. I'll go, but I'm not answering questions about you. That's absolutely your choice, I assured her. The new visitation facility resembled a cross between a community center and a security checkpoint. A uniformed officer checked IDs at the entrance, and cameras monitored the hallways and common areas. Mrs. Delacourt met us in the lobby, her professional demeanor firmly in place despite the tension. Mr. Harrison is already in room C, she informed us. I've reviewed the rules with him, including appropriate conversation topics. The visit is scheduled for 90 minutes. I hugged Emma and Lucas, whispering reassurances, then watched them. Follow Mrs. Delacour down the hall. The waiting area for parents was deliberately separated from the visitation rooms, creating a buffer zone of privacy. I settled into an uncomfortable plastic chair with a stack of ungraded essays, attempting to focus on something productive. 43 minutes later, I'd been checking my watch compulsively, Mrs. Delacour appeared in the waiting area without. "The children. We need to speak privately," she said, her expression grave. My heart hammered as I followed her to a small conference room. "Are the children all right?" "They're with a child welfare coordinator," she assured me. "Physically, they're fine. Emotionally," she shook her head. Mr. Harrison became increasingly agitated during the visit. When Emma refused to answer questions about your home life, he began making hostile statements about you and the legal proceedings. My stomach tightened. "What kind of statements? What kind of He told the children you had fabricated evidence against him, that you were trying to steal his money and keep them from him. When I redirected the conversation, he became confrontational, insisting he had a right to tell his children the truth about their mother." Mrs. Delacourt's professional composure slipped slightly, revealing genuine concern. When Lucas became upset, Emma told her father to stop being mean. Mr. Harrison then accused her of being brainwashed and demanded that the children tell him if anyone strange had been staying at your house. The implication was clear. Nathan was trying to manufacture evidence of an affair, creating a parallel to his own infidelity to use against me. It was manipulative and cruel, especially to involve the children. "What happened next?" I asked, dreading the answer. Emma asked to end the visit. When I supported her request, Mr. Harrison became verbally abusive, claiming I was biased against him. Security personnel had to intervene when he refused to lower his voice or modify his behavior. Mrs. Delacourt looked genuinely pained. "I've terminated the visit and will be filing a detailed report recommending suspension of visitation privileges pending a psychological evaluation." I found Emma and Lucas with a kind-faced woman who introduced herself as Ms. Patterson from Child Protective Services. Lucas was playing with building blocks, his face tear-streaked but composed. Emma sat rigidly in a chair, her expression eerily reminiscent of my own when processing trauma. "Mom," Lucas ran to me, wrapping his arms around my legs. "Dad got really mad. He said you're telling lies, but I know you don't tell lies because you said lying is wrong even when the truth is hard." I hugged him close, then reached for Emma, who remained still. "I'm so sorry you experienced that. Dad is having a hard time managing his feelings right now." "That's what Ms. Patterson said." Lucas nodded sagely. "Dad's feelings aren't our fault." Emma finally spoke, her voice unnaturally calm. "He's not who I thought he was." The simple statement carried the weight of a childhood illusion shattered. At 11, my daughter was confronting a brutal reality, that parents could fail catastrophically, that love could be wielded as a weapon. Ms. Patterson pulled me aside while the children gathered their belongings. "I'll need to follow up with a home visit as part of our standard protocol when there's a disturbance during supervised visitation." Based on Mrs. Delacourt's observations and my interaction with the children, I have no immediate concerns about their well-being in your care. "Of course," I agreed. "Whatever you need." "There's something else you should know," she added, lowering her voice. "Your husband made some concerning statements after the children left. He claimed you were turning everyone against him as part of an elaborate revenge plan. The facility security has notified the police about possible escalation risk." Another layer of threat. Another reason to remain vigilant. I thanked her for the information and focused on getting the children home safely, where they could process the day's events in a secure environment. That evening, after Lucas had fallen asleep clutching his favorite stuffed animal, Emma came to find me in the kitchen. I was methodically chopping vegetables for the next day's lunch prep. the rhythmic action soothing my frayed nerves. "Mom," she said quietly, "I need to tell you something." I set down the knife and gave her my full attention. "Of course, sweetheart. Anything." "Dad showed us pictures on his phone. Of you." She twisted her fingers together nervously. "They were taken outside your school, and at the grocery store, and one of you getting mail yesterday." A chill ran through me. Nathan had been following me, documenting my movements. The restraining order hadn't deterred him. It had simply driven him to more secretive methods of surveillance. "There were pictures of a man, too," Emma continued. "The new history teacher who helped carry your books to the car when it was raining last week. Dad said he was your boyfriend, and that's why you wanted the divorce." Mr. Lawson, a recently hired colleague who had indeed helped me with some books during a downpour. The interaction had lasted perhaps 3 minutes, completely innocent and in full view of other faculty members. But in Nathan's distorted narrative, it had become evidence of betrayal. "Dad said he's collecting evidence," Emma finished, her eyes troubled. "For court, to show you're the bad one, not him." I pulled Emma into a hug, my mind racing. Nathan's escalation from financial misconduct to stalking represented a dangerous progression. His need to recast himself as the victim rather than the perpetrator was driving increasingly erratic behavior. "Thank you for telling me," I said, keeping my voice steady despite my alarm. "You did exactly the right thing." After Emma went to bed, I called Detective Morales to report the stalking behavior and potential restraining order violation. She listened carefully, then sighed. "Document everything your daughter told you while it's fresh. I'll increase patrols near your home and speak with the school about security awareness." The photographs themselves aren't necessarily illegal, but combined with the restraining order and his behavior at the visitation, they establish a concerning pattern. I also called Jenna, who was predictably furious. "He's digging himself deeper," she fumed. "First financial fraud, now stalking and using the children as interrogators. The family court will eviscerate him when they see Mrs. Delacourt's report." "That's assuming he's thinking rationally," I countered. "His behavior suggests otherwise." Jenna's voice softened. "You're right. This isn't just about the legal case anymore. It's about safety. Have you considered staying somewhere else for a while?" I had, but leaving felt like surrender, like allowing Nathan to drive us from our home. Moreover, the house represented stability for Emma and Lucas amid the chaos of the past month. To uproot them again seemed cruel. "We're staying," I decided. "But I'm accepting Robert's offer to install a proper security system." The next morning, I met with my school principal to explain the situation. Mr. Hargrove had been supportive throughout the divorce process, but the revelation of Nathan's surveillance required additional workplace precautions. "We'll have security. Escorts for you to and from your car," he promised, "and we'll alert front office staff to be vigilant about unauthorized visitors." As we spoke, my phone rang. Linda. "Rebecca, you need to know something," she said without preamble. "Nathan came to our house last night, demanding money for his legal fees. When Robert refused, he became unhinged. He was ranting about conspiracies and revenge. He said everyone would see the truth soon." "Did you call the police?" I asked. "Alarmed. Yes. By the time they arrived, he'd left, but they took a report." She sounded exhausted, the weight of her son's downward spiral evident in every word. "Robert and I have decided to get a restraining order ourselves. Our lawyer is filing it today." I felt a wave of sadness for these two people caught in the destructive wake of their son's choices. They'd lost not only their relationship with their son, but also their image of who he was, the carefully maintained fiction of normalcy that families often preserve despite evidence to the contrary. "I'm so sorry, Linda." "No," she replied firmly. "We're sorry. For whatever we did or didn't. Do that contributed to who he's become. For not seeing the signs earlier." She paused. "The grandchildren are the priority now. protecting them from witnessing more of this behavior. After we hung up, I sat in my classroom during prep period, staring at the neat rows of desks. A month ago, my greatest concern had been the upcoming literature unit on To Kill a Mockingbird. Now I was navigating restraining orders, supervised visitation reports, and security protocols. Yet, beneath the chaos and uncertainty, I recognized something unexpected emerging, a clarity about who I was and what I deserved. Nathan's text message divorce had initially seemed like the ultimate betrayal. Instead, it had become the catalyst for reclaiming my power and protecting what truly mattered. His attempt to devastate me had revealed a strength I hadn't realized I possessed, and that perhaps was the outcome he'd never anticipated. 6 months. After Nathan's text message divorce, I stood in the courthouse hallway waiting for our final hearing. The journey to this moment had been arduous, filled with Nathan's escalating behavior, legal maneuvers, and painful revelations. After his arrest at the children's school, Nathan had spent 2 weeks in jail before being released on strict conditions, including an ankle monitor and expanded restraining orders protecting not only me and the children, but also his parents. The incident had been a turning point. Even Martin Reeves, his aggressive attorney, had withdrawn from the case, citing irreconcilable differences with the client regarding case strategy. Nathan's new attorney, a subdued woman named Ms. Patel, had approached Jenna about a genuine settlement 3 weeks ago. The terms reflected reality rather than Nathan's fantasies. I would keep the house, my retirement accounts, and full custody of the children. Nathan would have supervised visitation only after completing court-mandated therapy and anger management. The financial division acknowledged my separate property and the documented fraud he'd committed. He's finally realized he has no leverage, Jenna had explained. The criminal charges, the documented stalking, the visitation supervisor's reports, he's facing serious consequences if this goes to trial. Though the settlement was favorable, I'd insisted on today's final hearing before the judge. I needed formal closure, the official ending of a chapter that had begun with that callous text message. "Ready?" Jenna asked, checking her watch. "They should be calling us any minute." I nodded, smoothing my charcoal pencil skirt. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, professional, confident, forward-looking. Not a victim's clothing, but a survivor's. The courtroom doors opened, and Ms. Patel emerged. She nodded professionally to Jenna before addressing me directly. "Mr. Harrison wants to speak with you before the hearing, in the consultation room with both attorneys present." Seeing my hesitation, she added, "He's prepared to make a statement he feels you should hear privately rather than in open court." I glanced at Jenna, who raised an eyebrow. "Your choice, Rebecca. You're under no obligation." After a moment's consideration, I agreed. Perhaps this final conversation would provide the closure I sought. The consultation room was small and windowless. Nathan sat at the table looking diminished. 6 months of legal consequences had taken their toll, the designer clothes replaced by an off-the-rack suit that hung loosely on his frame, the confident posture supplanted by a slight stoop. When he looked up, I saw unfamiliar shadows under his eyes. "Thank you for agreeing to talk," he began, his voice lacking its usual commanding tone. "I wanted to say some things without the court record." I remained standing, unwilling to settle into what could be a lengthy manipulation. "I'm listening." Nathan cleared his throat. "I've lost everything. My job, my parents, access to my children. Even Alicia left after my second arrest." He paused, seeming to expect sympathy I couldn't provide. "When none came," he continued, "I still think you turned everyone against me, but my therapist says I need to accept responsibility for my actions regardless." It wasn't quite an apology, but from Nathan, this grudging acknowledgement represented significant movement. "The children are doing well," I offered, the only relevant information I felt compelled to share. "Emma is thriving in middle school, and Lucas's reading has improved significantly." Something flickered across Nathan's face. Regret, perhaps, for what he'd sacrificed with his impulsivity and cruelty. "I want them to know someday that I didn't just abandon them," he said, "that I fought to be in their lives. What you actually did was traumatize them," I replied evenly. "You emptied their bank account, left without saying goodbye, then interrogated them about me during visitation. That's what they'll remember unless you work very hard to create different memories moving forward." Nathan flinched but didn't argue. Another change from the man who'd always needed the last word. "The settlement is fair," he acknowledged. "More than fair, given everything. I just wanted you to know I'm signing it voluntarily, not under duress." I almost laughed at the irony. His concern about duress after all he'd put us through. But there was no satisfaction in watching his downfall, only relief that the chaos was ending. "Is that all?" I asked, ready to proceed with the hearing. He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded piece of paper. "I wrote something for the children. When they're ready. If you think they'll ever be ready." I took the letter without comment, neither promising to deliver it nor refusing. That decision would depend on its contents and the children's emotional needs. "For what it's worth," Nathan said as I turned to leave. "I know I handled everything wrong. The marriage, the divorce, everything after. I was so angry that you seemed prepared, like you'd known all along I would fail. It felt like you never really believed in me." For the first time, I recognized a fragment of truth in his perspective. I had prepared, not because I'd wanted the marriage to fail, but because I'd seen the signs and protected myself accordingly. To Nathan, whose self-image couldn't accommodate his own failings, my preparation had seemed like a betrayal rather than prudence. "I did believe in you," I said finally. "For 14 years. But I also believed in myself enough to recognize when something wasn't working. That's the difference between us, Nathan. I accepted reality while you tried to bend it to your version of the truth." He had no response to that. After a moment of heavy silence, we returned to the courtroom where Judge Harmon was preparing to call our case. The proceedings were anticlimactic, after months of drama. The judge reviewed the settlement agreement, confirmed both parties entered it knowingly and voluntarily, and signed the final dissolution order. With a stroke of her pen, my marriage officially ended, not with the bang of Nathan's text message, but with the quiet finality of legal process. Outside the courthouse, Linda and Robert waited on a bench. Though their relationship with Nathan remained strained, they had become bedrock support for Emma and Lucas, spending time with their grandchildren every week and helping create stability amid the upheaval. "It's done?" Linda asked, rising to meet me. "Yes, all finished." The wave of relief I expected didn't immediately come, perhaps because the emotional end had arrived long before the legal one. "We're taking you to lunch," Robert declared, "to celebrate your fresh start." As we walked to the restaurant, I reflected on the journey from that first shocking text. Nathan had intended to devastate me, to leave me financially and emotionally broken. Instead, his cruelty had revealed strengths I hadn't known I possessed. I'd protected my children, secured our future, and maintained dignity throughout the ordeal. While ordering lunch, my phone buzzed with a message from my school principal. "Committee approved your proposal for the new creative writing program. Congratulations, Director Harrison." I smiled, sharing the news with Linda and Robert. The writing program had been my dream for years, one Nathan had dismissed as impractical. Now it would become reality under my leadership. Sometimes endings became beginnings in disguise. Nathan's text message divorce had closed one chapter but opened another, one where I wrote my own story, on my own terms. He had emptied our bank account, not knowing I had secured so much more than money: confidence, clarity, and the freedom to build something better from the wreckage of what he'd destroyed. In the end, that was what he truly hadn't seen coming.